This video is brought to you in part by TCGplayer.com. If you're interested in viewing this deck list, just click the first link in the description.
I'm a wizard, mind you. His face is kept by powerful God.
What's up, my wizards? Dev, Mtg, we like magic, and we are coming to the end of Hour of Devastation Standard. Currently, we've still got like a month of F&Ms left, which is more than it sounds like, but still not all the time in the world. So I'm going to give you a deck. I wanted to be relatively budget, and I wanted to survive rotations. And with that in mind, I'm going to show you $30 blue-black cycling today. This deck is a lot of fun to play. Well, near as I can tell, there are two ways to build this deck right now. You can go with a more slow, sort of controlling build that has like countervailing winds, maybe Archfiend of Ifnir up there on the curve to close the game out. You could also play like Drake Haven in the main deck if you wanted to slow things down a little bit. But there's also a way to go relatively fast and get in creatures unblocked for a lot of damage. And that's what I want to do. That sounds fun. So to that end, we're going to focus the deck around three specific creatures that don't cost a whole lot and can do a bunch of damage for you pretty early in the game. So with that in mind, let's check out the 4 copies of Shadowstorm Vizier, the whole playset of Cunning Survivor, and the 4 copies of Vile Manifestation. Right now you're looking at our 3 main win conditions in the deck, and there are other creatures, and some of them pretty good and decently sized creatures too, but more often than not our game plan revolves around getting 1 or even 2 of these creatures out and then winning in the mid-game sometime by just cycling all the cards every turn. So essentially look at this as an aggro deck. You know, it plays a bunch of low-to-the-ground creatures. All these guys just cost 2 mana. And it plays a bunch of pump spells in effect. You know, we've got 36 cards in this deck that have cycling, and each of those is essentially a pump spell for as little as 1 mana that also draws us into more pump spells. Now, Shadowstorm Vizier is obviously a good creature in this strategy. The flying is really nice. Give her some evasion. We want that. But speaking of evasion, Cunning Survivor has impressed me even more than Vizier. I really like the name Shadowstorm Vizier. I like the card itself. I like the flavor of it. The card is just cool, but Cunning Survivor has honestly just won me more games. You know, just the ability to go unblocked after you cycled 3, 4, or sometimes more cards, depending, you know, is just unbelievable. Cunning Survivor can put the game away in just a couple of turns. And when it comes to Vile Manifestation, it is not like too uncommon in the mid game, like turn 5, 6, for this to be like at least a 10 power creature. It's really not tough at all. Again, so many of our cards cycle, and the majority of them only cost 1 mana to cycle. Vile Manifestation definitely deserves the entire 4 of here, and if you got nothing else to do with it, you can always cycle it away to make a Survivor bigger. But I did tell you that we're playing other creatures in this deck. As a matter of fact, we're playing a total of 24 creatures. So let me show you these other 3 guys real quick. We're going to play 4 copies of Vizier of Tumbling Sands, 4 copies of Curator of Mysteries, and 4 copies of Hollow One. Now, Vizier of Tumbling Sands is a body which is often more relevant than you might think. Just the fact that this can be a creature when you need it to is important. And it can cycle for effectively 1 mana, you know, and it can untap a black source sometimes if we really needed to. So there's a lot of versatility on the card. As far as Curator of Mysteries, we're mostly just looking to cycle this away for a blue, but if we draw it late and we have the mana, we can just play a 4/4 flyer. We got no problem with that. And if we do play it, then we can scry whenever we cycle something, which is actually like incredible when it happens for us, because we can essentially use those scries to make sure that we blast through land pockets and scry into more cycling cards. So Curator of Mysteries is pretty good, whether we're just spending 1 mana on a card and a pump for our dudes, or we're actually playing a huge body with flying. And Hollow One just kind of has to be here, you know, we've got to play it in the deck. It's pretty easy to play this either for free or at a ridiculous discount, you know. Pay just a mana or so. A lot of the time for a 4/4 body, you will always take that, whether you're using it for offense or defense. It's just always a good deal. Hollow One goes in. Now, when you look at our creature suite as a whole, it looks a little bit weak, but keep in mind, Cunning Survivor can win you games sometimes. Shadowstorm Vizier is also there to get in a good amount of damage over the course of a game. Vile Manifestation can get huge. Curator is a 4/4 flyer. Hollow One is a pretty big creature too, so it looks a little weak, but actually 24 creatures is kind of a lot, and some of them are relatively big or can at least get big. But we're going to play some spells in this deck, and we're going to mostly prioritize cycling for as little as possible. But we can do that and still play a bunch of awesome spells like Censor. We're going to play a playset of this. This is the most expensive non-land card in the deck, but it has gone down from like 250 at its peak down to like $2 for a while. Now it's like $1.50. It's, you know, it's steadily falling. And I think that Censor's always going to be a somewhat important card in Standard. There's no denying Censor's a good card. And if you don't get your, you know, creature, whatever that may be, on turn 2, you can always just use that mana on a Censor. And again, we're looking to mostly be good with our creatures within the first few turns, so it's pretty easy to catch them off guard with a Censor when they're trying to kill your guys. Also going to play 4 copies of Hieroglyphic Illumination because, yes, like, I've talked about Illumination a bunch of times at this point, and I'm sure I'll talk about it more, but just the ability to cycle it away for 1 mana for a card is always a decent deal. And later on in the game, if you need the card advantage, it's there for you. You will sometimes not feel bad about paying 4 mana for this card. Also going to play 4 copies of Scarab Feast in the deck. This has actually been, like, really important in a lot of games. Like, I was just going to go with the 2 of Scarab Feast, you know. Eventually made it a 4 of just because I thought, like, we need more stuff that cycles for 1 mana. I just want all the stuff that cycles for 1. But Scarab Feast is very often playable. You know, like, there's Godfarer's Gift in this format. Even after it rotates, there's Godfarer's Gift. There's going to be, you know, multiple reanimation strategies. You've got things like Embalm, Eternalize, Dread Wanderer is still in the format, Scrappy Scrounger, Earthshaker Kenra. There's just, like, so much stuff. Liliana, she's still going to be in the Death Majesty. She's still going to be in the format, too. So it's not like reanimation's not going to be a thing. And while this format is still around, we've got, like, Delirium and stuff to worry about. So, like, Scarab Feast just does so much work so often for very, very cheap. And to finish off the main deck already, and a lot of 4-ofs here, and a lot of them are like pretty obvious includes for what we're trying to do. So, but the last card in the main deck is the 4 whole copies of Razaketh's Right. Now this is essentially just pay a mana to draw a card. That's what we're looking to do most of the time, but later on in the game, especially if things have stalled out for either us or our opponent or both of us, you know, the Razaketh's Right can just get us right back in the game, you know, go get whatever we want at the time. We can go get a Curator of Mysteries if we need a big flyer. We can go get a Cunning Survivor if we want to start chaining cycles and just attack for 5 really quick, you know. It's just like, Razaketh's Right will sometimes be used as a tutor and you won't feel too bad about hard casting it. But most of the time, when you end up having to pay the 5 for it, you're okay with tutoring up a card. You're fine with that. But again, more often than not, it's just a mana for a card and a pump spell for your, you know, the 3 creatures we care about most in the deck. And that's what I really want to hammer home about all of the cards that I've just listed off here, sort of machine gun style, is that a lot of them cycle for just 1 mana. So again, they're essentially just ways to get through our deck extremely quickly and pump our guys as efficiently as possible. So just keep that in mind. What we want to play cycling cards that are good and hard cast well when we need to, but we're also prioritizing very, very cheap cycles here. Now, we ended up on 20 lands in this deck. We're fairly close to the ground, and it helps that, like, 20 of our main deck cards cycle for just 1 mana. And we've got a bunch of other cards that cycle for 2. Again, like, 36 cards, over half the deck. Cycles, and most of it at a pretty efficient cost. So we really don't need to run that many lands, especially considering we do not want to run into land pockets when we're trying to cycle through a bunch of cards all at once. So we want to play a relatively low number of lands, and we have got to play Fetid Pools. I would play the Cycling Deserts, you know, but I'm just a little wary of having more lands that can potentially come into play tapped. If we want to do that, then I'd probably go up a land or 2. Now here's our sideboard right here, and this is where that slower deck I was talking about resides, at least in this list, you know. Ruthless Sniper and Archfiend of Ifnir can both be brought in against creature-based decks. Those are, even Ruthless Sniper is actually a really good card. I've played with it before and have been really a fan of it every time it comes down. If we have a couple of cards that cycle in our hand, just a couple of extra mana to use, Ruthless Sniper doesn't get out of hand or anything, but it can cripple a couple of creatures really fast, keep us in the game, or maybe get things out of the air so that Shadowstorm can attack, you know. Just Ruthless has actually been a pretty impressive card out of the sideboard against very aggressive strategies. And same thing with Archfiend of Ifnir. Again, if we're looking to go a little bit slower in game 2, then Archfiend is a great card at the top of our curve, and I shouldn't have to even say that. It's kind of obvious. As far as the other slow stuff we're playing in mid-range and other matchups, we've got Countervailing Winds. I want to counterspell somewhere in the 75, especially against mid-range. Drake Haven will come in against slow matchups, like Control especially. If we resolve a Drake Haven, they don't have a whole lot of ways of dealing with it, and if we just make a few creatures and force them to draw a sweeper, we can win games that way. Drakehaven is very good against control when you can resolve it, and it's even decent against the mid-range matchup, but I just don't want to draw a 3-mana enchantment all the time when I'm looking to blast through the deck, so it's relegated to the sideboard. Shadow of the Grave is also in there, mostly for long games. Note that when we're in matchups where the game goes really long, we want to change our strategy a little bit, and Shadow of the Grave is part of that. It's also so that we can sometimes pull off like huge chains when we have a lot of mana, you know, cycle 2 or 3 cards for Cunning Survivor, get him big, and then cast our Shadow of the Grave, cycle 2 or 3 more cards, get it really big. You know, sometimes Shadow of the Grave can lead to crazy swings with Survivor or Shadowstorm, but I don't think it's quite worth it in the main deck, and I know I'm probably going to catch hate for that, but this deck is tuned, in the main deck at least, to where we want to cycle as much as possible and go as fast as possible. And honestly, Shadow of the Grave just costs too much of our mana in order to let us go really fast. You know, so just didn't make the main deck cut, but will come in slower matchups. And then Wander in Death is also against control. We won't always resolve this, and then sometimes if we do resolve it, we won't resolve the creatures that we got back. But this is just a way to get card advantage against control and get some of the creatures back they've either killed or counterspelled, because it's going to happen. Here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 59, not too shabby for a $30 deck. It actually plays a little bit better than it might look, because a lot of the cards that cycle right now come with pretty good options tacked on. Like Illumination's not bad. Scarab Feast is not bad right now, I promise you. Try it out. Censor's always been a decent card. Curator of Mysteries is pretty good too, honestly. Like, a lot of the cards that cycle for a cheap cost are in and of themselves decent cards. So the list is not too bad and can perform against some decks, especially slower creature-based strategies, which we don't see a whole lot of right this second. We see some sort of slower graveyard strategies. You know, I've been coming across a lot of Godfarer's Gift decks lately, and if they don't get a refurbish on turn 4, they are in trouble, and they really don't start doing anything worthwhile until turn 4 or 5 sometimes. So, and honestly, if everything works out the way we want it to, we're kind of like another cycling deck that's already in the format, New Perspectives. Now, we don't have this crazy combo win that just locks the game on turn 6, but if all goes well for us, we will often win the game on turn 6, just like that deck does. But I don't have to point out the obvious cons here, you know. We're sort of hinging everything on a couple of different creatures. And yeah, again, we've got 24 creatures, but the really important ones can be a little bit fragile. That said, I will say that, like, Cunning Survivor forces your opponent to answer that or race you. And sometimes the racing is a little bit harder than they might think it is. We're just getting in for 5 or 6 some turns with a Cunning Survivor once it gets to the mid-game. If you take nothing else from this, Cunning Survivor is very real. I like that card a lot. I'm tapped out for now, y'all, but what are we doing next time? Well, I need your input on this one. Let me know if I should do any more deck techs. Like, I've got 1 or 2 more that I want to push out here and that I kind of want to show you, but at the same time, we're getting really, really late on in this format. I've got a couple of other sort of different video types that I want to put out. You know, a couple of top 10 lists, a video or 2 about rotating cards, the video about the cards that I want to see in Ixalan. And then, of course, Ixalan spoilers are going to be happening, like, super soon, too, here. So we don't have a whole lot of time for decks. Let me know if there's anything specific you want to see, or just let me know if you think it might be time to move on to other content until rotation. But that's all I got for now. Remember, if you want to look at this deck list all in one place, just self-contained, just click the first link in the description. That'll take you over to TCG Playa de Espansa. You can check out the video on their website. You can also like the video if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Remember to do that. Sub if you're new. Click the bell for the notifications. And if you really want to, you can kick us $1 on Patreon. That helps out like more than you think it does. That's patreon.com/SBMTG. If you want to help the channel out in any of those ways, it would mean a lot to me. But for now, I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards.